Okay, so I was kind of sitting here and like getting my playlist in order, right? Like I'm writing down what videos we're gonna do next when it comes to the X-Men, right? And we're getting closer and closer of wrapping up our coverage over X-Men Apocalypse to 12, like the next big crossover for our playlist. But I realized something. There was another crossover for the X-Men that took place between Magneto War and also X-Men Apocalypse to 12. And that would be the Shattering. Now, the Shattering is a very interesting storyline because I kind of feel like a lot of fans don't talk much about it. A lot of fans don't truly care much for it, or a lot of fans just don't remember it at all because it was quickly forgotten. Now, this was a 10-part storyline, right? Now, 8 of those chapters went over to Uncanny X-Men and also X-Men. Now, 2 chapters went over to Gambit. But once you had Marvel finish all 10 chapters, we then got a spin-off series, kind of like an epilogue called Astonishing X-Men. That was only like 3 issues, and that was really it. And then all those different issues, a few more cable issues, led into the actual big crossover Apocalypse to 12, and we're getting closer and closer to finally covering that storyline. But we got to sit down and cover X-Men The Shattering. So we're going to talk about the first 2 chapters of this crossover, which is Uncanny X-Men issue number 372. Now, in the opening page of this storyline, we pick up with Nina and also Renee. Now, for Nina, she's a character we met a while ago. Well, really, we met her at the end of X-Men Onslaught. The idea that she was supposedly created by Bastion. And so that kind of led us into Operation Zero Tolerance. Now, for Charles, he was able to help her escape from Bastion and hand her over to Renee. Now, when it came to Renee, she was this great scientist from Genosha. Really, her main goal back then was to help find a cure for the legacy virus because there was a huge outbreak over in Genosha. And when she came over to America, her main goal was to find her old friend, Charles Xavier, to hopefully find a cure for the legacy virus. But lately, she has been watching over Nina. But apparently for Nina, she's been having nightmares and telling us like, hey, something is coming. They are coming. And we're kind of like, who is they? But before we're able to properly learn like what's going on with Nina, we then switch over to the X-Men. Now, this is really more us kind of getting reminded about what's going on with Charles Xavier. And let me explain. You see, for Charles Xavier, the last few storylines, with him finally being able to reunite with the X-Men, because when it came to Charles Xavier, literally right after you had like X-Men Onslaught happen, he was arrested with Bastion Operation Zero Tolerance. Then the X-Men couldn't find him at all after Operation Zero Tolerance. That led into Hunt for Xavier. They finally found him. But then after those crossovers there, you really did have Charles kind of look at his team a little differently. He kind of feels like the X-Men are not really being able to reach their full potential. But it's also the idea like when it comes to Charles Xavier, is him kind of wondering if he will ever be able to reach his dreams about the idea of the mutants and the humans being able to live together in harmony. Now, the reason why I'm bringing all of that up because when it comes to Charles Xavier, he has been lately pushing his team to literally their limits. And they're kind of like, Charles, enough is enough. As a matter of fact, you have Gambit be that guy who does try to step up to Charles Xavier. But Charles is not trying to listen. But it's also Charles kind of bringing up past drama when it comes to Gambit. Like, for example, the idea of the mutant massacre. We had just learned that Homeboy here had a hand in the mutant massacre. And so for Gambit, he also gets very upset. But now we have to shift over to Bishop and Deathbird. Now, hear me out. When it comes to these 2 characters, they really have been stuck together for a long time when it came to X-Men comics. You see, right before the trial of Gambit, you had the X-Men travel across the universe to help out the Shi'ar Empire. On their way back, their spacecraft kind of got, well, destroyed. Now, most of the X-Men, they were able to make it back to Earth. Bishop was not able to. And the reason why, because of Deathbird. Because Deathbird, she had fallen in love with Bishop. And so once Bishop had woke up, she began to give him this crazy story of like, the X-Men are dead. It's now just you and I. Why don't we just go ahead and live together? Now, for Bishop, he already knew that she was lying. And so now it's him saying like, no, you are gonna take me back over to Earth right now. And so we see Deathbird and Bishop trying their best to make it back over to Earth. Now, here's the thing, because I kind of realized something. None of the X-Men had realized that Bishop was gone, I feel like, because honestly, all the different story arcs, I do not remember anyone saying like, hey guys, where's Bishop? But anyways, for Deathbird, she's right now trying to get back over to Earth. But they realize something, they kind of pick on some kind of mutation. The problem is that that mutation is a planet. Like literally a planet right now is being mutated. And so for Bishop and also Domino, they want to go investigate. Now, when it comes to the X-Men, we see Charles just literally putting them through like all these different training sessions. And matter of fact, it has been hours now. And so it's Storm right now with the command room kind of like, Charles, the X-Men right now, they need a break. They have been going through all these different training sessions for a very long time. It's now time for them to at least have a break. But for Charles, it's a no. And the reason why, because the X-Men are not his level. And he believes all they need is to build up their stamina. And so we see him right now just trying to push the X-Men even more. We also kind of see that he's now beginning to examine Marrow really more out of everyone else in the danger room. Now, for a brief moment, we do shift over to Nina, and we see that for Nina, she's quickly teleported somewhere else after continuing to freak out about the idea of something or someone or a group of people are going to come after her. So we're kind of left to wonder what in the world happened to, well, Nina. Now, I kind of want to go ahead and shift our focus back onto the X-Men. Here's the reason why. Marrow. Let me explain. Because in an earlier storyline, really two storylines prior to this one, when it came to Marrow, she was kind of injured by Gambit. You see, they were in a different dimension where their powers did not work properly. So unfortunately for Gambit, he had somewhat injured her. And it did kind of seem like she might die. But then after that storyline, the X-Men were kind of forced to travel back in time and got stuck on a Skrull homeworld moments prior to Galactus consuming that world. But for Gambit, he wanted to save her life. And so he put her inside a Shi'ar device that healed her up. But it also kind of gave her the ability to control her powers a tad bit more. And so for Charles, he wants to see how much better she is when it comes to controlling her bones in her body. But it's Charles right now continuing to push her even more and more. And when you have Gambit or Kitty Pryde or Nightcrawler trying to step in and tell Charles he's doing too much, he's not even trying to listen to them. Like, for example, Kitty Pryde and Nightcrawler as well, he calls Excalibur a failed project. That whole idea right there was dumb as heck. It made no sense. And the reason why it didn't work out because it had you guys. You're not me, and I know what's best for you, the mutant race, my team, my school, everything. That's why Excalibur failed, or that's why every other X family fails, because you guys don't have me, the big gun Charles Xavier. And so you did have Storm say, enough, we gotta talk. Now, this meeting is very short-lived, right? Because you do have Storm and Charles kind of go into this private room to have a conversation. Now, for Kitty Pryde, she wants to go ahead and storm out and go back over to Mirror Island. Take Colossus, take Nightcrawler with her, and just reform Excalibur back all over again. But it's Nightcrawler saying, Kitty, go upstairs, I'll stay here, and wait for Storm to come out, and me and her talk about what's going on with Charles Xavier. Now, once Storm does come out, it's her saying like, it ain't good. And matter of fact, we got to call in Jean Grey now. And I kind of realized something, that for the X-Men at this time, they don't have a psychic. Like, there's no Psylocke, there's no Cable. It's only Jean Grey. Wait, I forgot, her and Scott, they left the team to kind of give him a break, but also kind of give Scott the chance to heal up after Operation Zero Tolerance. But to close on this chapter, we then shift over to Nina, and we see her right now being confronted by different characters who are all brand new. And we're all kind of left to wonder, who in the heck are these characters? But as we get into the next chapter, X-Men issue number 92, really getting into the idea of Cyclops and Jean Grey returning back over to school of Charles Xavier. Now, when Cyclops and Jean Grey walk in, they kind of realize something, that everybody is about to dip out. Like, literally, you have Gambit right now packed and ready to go. You have Marrow wanting to go with him. You have Storm trying to stop them, and Rogue is just standing there. And when it comes to Colossus, he's also trying to keep Marrow here as well. Now, for Kitty Pryde, she's ready to leave because the idea of Charles calling Excalibur a failed experiment, a failed project, she's also ready to go. Nightcrawler wants to stay. Wolverine, he also wants to stay. But it's the idea the X-Men are about to be officially over. And so we do see Gambit leave. He's the first to go. Now, when it comes to X-Men The Shattering, it technically leads into all of these different storylines in different books. So the Gambit book, the Uncanny X-Men book, the X-Men book, the Astonishing X-Men book. Like, it's the idea of the X-Men being officially broken into different kinds of, not only teams, but different storylines for themselves to handle. But when it comes to the part right here, Gambit is officially gone now. But now we switch over to the Man Knights. Now, when it comes to the Man Knights, they had taken Nina, like we saw at the end of the last chapter. It's the idea that she's now with her fellow Man Knights. And what they want to do is have her use her ability to look into the mind of the youngest Man Knight. And here's the reason why, because he can see the future in a way. Like, he has these visions. And so right now, it's the idea that they want to see what he sees, the idea of what could come down the road. And so for Nina, that is her assignment. But this storyline right here, like I said earlier, it goes into one of the four different storylines for X-Men The Shattering. And her storyline gets picked up in, I want to say, the Astonishing X-Men. The next video is Gambit's storyline for X-Men The Shattering. But now we kind of switch over to the X-Men. Now, it's Jean Grey and Charles having that private conversation about, like, what's going on at the moment right now with the X-Men. We're not really able to see that conversation, but when Jean Grey walks out, she tells Scott, Cyclops, like, hey, he now wants to see you. And so Scott goes in to see what in the world is going on. But also we're seeing like that trend continue, the idea of the X-Men breaking apart, because now you have Rogue trying to leave. And it's Rogue saying like, hey, I want a normal life. I don't want to sit here and wait for the next bad guy to attack us. I'm done being an X-Men. And so it's Rogue once again, because not too long ago we saw her leave the X-Men, but it's Rogue once again leaving the X-Men, but trying to get Kitty to leave as well. Now for Kitty, at first, she does not want to leave because of Nightcrawler. Because for Nightcrawler, he was the leader of Excalibur for many, many years, right? But then come back here, he's no longer in that leader role. And so for him, it's kind of like demotion, and she wants to be there for him. But it's Rogue saying like, Kitty, you are now making excuses. Let's go ahead and go. Let's get the heck out of here. And so you have Kitty leave and try to convince Colossus and Nightcrawler. And the thing is, they're with her. Like, hey, you know what? Let's go ahead and leave. And you know what? Let's also take Marrow with us. And so this kind of leads into, well, Bishop, right? Now, when it comes to Bishop, around this time, Marvel Comics, they're also kind of setting things up for Bishop to have his own solo series alongside with Wolverine, Cable, Gambit, even Havoc as well. And we'll cover Havoc series at a different time. But when it came to Bishop, for Marvel, they were like, hey, listen, let's get Bishop going. He had a book called Bishop, The Last X-Man. The problem is that for Marvel, they have not released the books online at all. Like, I think only 3 issues are online, and the 3 issues are so far apart from one another. So I'm kind of like hoping that sooner or later they'll go out of their way to release like the rest of those issues, because I do want to sit down and cover Bishop, the Last X-Man. But anyways, for Bishop, he's a Deathbird, and they had arrived at that planet where they said, hey, we had detected mutant DNA. Now, as they're walking around for Bishop, he realized it's coming from one particular area. But before he is able to investigate that area, Deathbird takes him out. Just like that. He's knocked out by Deathbird. You're kind of left to wonder, what in the world is she doing? When we do get back over to the X-Men, we're getting the idea again of the X-Men, the Shattering. Like, you now have more and more X-Men leaving. Now, it's Jean Grey and Scott, really more Jean Grey, trying to convince them, like, you guys should not leave, you should stay. But it's also Charles saying, no, get the heck out of here. Because I built this team for a purpose. I built this team to be the force to be reckoned with. Like, I am not here to deal with cowards or quitters. Like, no, go ahead and leave. I'll go out of my way and rebuild my own new X-Men team. So goodbye, Nightcrawler. Goodbye, Rogue. Goodbye, Colossus and Marrow, because I don't need you guys at all. Again, getting to the idea of X-Men, the Shattering right here. And so we do kind of see, you know, them leaving. Now, for Jean Grey and Scott and like Storm and Wolverine, they're like, hey, you know what? Charles probably a tad bit ill. No, for Charlie, he's like, I'm not ill. I'm not sick. I truly believe that it's now time for a change. Goodbye, and let's go ahead and rebuild the X-Men. And for Charles, he doesn't stop there, because when it comes to Cyclops and Jean Grey, they want to step in being like, hey, dude, you're going too far. But Charles said, actually, Cyclops is Jean Grey, you can also leave as well, because technically your dream was to leave a long time ago and get married and build a family. So get the heck out of here. So now for the X-Men, it's Charles Xavier, Storm, and Wolverine. Like those 3, and that's truthfully it. You're kind of like, where could this possibly go? Now, when it comes to Nina, for a brief moment, we see her kind of go into the mind of the youngest Midnight, and all she hears and sees is die, 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 and something dark coming very soon. And so she begins to freak out. Again, brief moment here, right? But we do switch back over to Charles Xavier, is him also dismissing Wolverine as well. Now, Wolverine wanted to stay with Charles. And the reason why, because in an earlier storyline, you have both characters kind of get fused into one body. Like Charles was inside the body of Wolverine. And so with their minds being connected, Wolverine was able to kind of look into the mind of Charles and vice versa. And so for Wolverine, it's him saying like, I truthfully understand what Charles is going through in a way, but it's Charles saying like, I don't care. Like, I saw your mind. I can tell right now we have nothing in common. Like, get the out of here now, dude. And so just like that, Wolverine is gone. So now it's Storm and Charles Xavier. So like, wait, where could the story possibly go? When Bishop does wake up, he sees a sign that basically says Las Vegas, Nevada, 42 miles that way. So Bishop's kind of like, wait a second, what in the world is going on here? Like, when I last checked, I was on a completely different planet. What is exactly happening here? But to go ahead and kind of like wrap up everything going on in this storyline, we do switch back over to Nina. And for Nina, it's her right now trying to get a hold of Charles Xavier, except she is unable to get access to his mind to have a conversation with him. So she goes over to Jean Grey. And so when she does appear in front of Jean Grey, Cyclops, and also Wolverine, she's like, hey guys, I need the X-Men. And Jean Grey says, the X-Men are gone. But you did have all 3 say, nah, we're right here. And so we kind of see a new X-Men team here, a different kind of version. It's Wolverine, it's Cyclops, and Jean Grey, and possibly others who will join them as they go into their own book, better known as Astonishing X-Men, and that will be covered down the road. But as we're getting into the opening pages of this storyline, we do learn very quickly here that for Gambit, is him right now breaking into the school of Charles Xavier. Here's the reason why, because it's really more of Gambit right now trying to figure out like, why would Charles go out of his way to disband the X-Men? Now, When it comes to Gambit, he is able to discover what could be the possible reason. The idea that Charles had lost his trust in the X-Men, that somebody on the team that Charles kind of feels like might betray him. Now, here's the thing, because for Gambit, at this point in time, he's that one person they truly can't trust. And the reason why, because for Gambit, he was the guy at a hand in the mutant massacre that took place back in the 1980s, where you had marauders killing off the Morlocks. And so, for most of the X-Men, when they found out for Gambit, he was kind of put on that list of keep an eye on that guy right there because he really can't be trusted all the way. But now we see here that for Gambit, he wants to help the X-Men out and kind of figure out like who's the person that Charles truly believes that could betray them. Now, for Gambit, we also see him heading over to meet Claire Deluc. Now, for Claire, she's not really an overall important character. Matter of fact, I want to say she only appears like 2 or 3 times in Marvel Comics. And one of the times she does appear is Uncanny X-Men, like a while ago. And so either way, it's Gambit right now trying to use her to find somebody else. Someone better known as Scalp Hunter. Now, Scalp Hunter is part of the Marauders. And so it's Gambit right now saying, I need to find him, especially like right now. But this kind of leads into, well, it leads to Gambit having a dream. Now, while having this dream, he's then confronted by the Fontanelle. Now, this is a character that we had officially talked about in the earlier videos of Gambit. The idea that she's kind of working for the new sun, but she has been going into other people's dreams and collecting information about Gambit. And so, like right now, she's in his mind right now, trying to gather more things about him. Now, really, she's not really able to get that clear picture of Gambit, but it's really more the idea that she wants him to kind of think of a few different things like, who are we? How we come this way? Why are we here? And where are we going? Like, go ahead and think about all those different things about yourself so that she'll then be able to learn more things about him. But once you do have Gambit wake up, he's then confronted by the Courier. Now, the Courier is this guy who just, well, like his name says, he's a courier. And he works for the new sun as well. And his courier right now telling Gambit like, hey, the new sun wants to finally meet you. Now, guys, remember, we don't know really much about the new sun yet. All we know is the guy has supposedly saved Gambit's life not too long ago and has been kind of working for the new sun as a way to pay him back. Now, the reason why you have the new sun meeting up with Gambit is the idea that for the new sun, he kind of want to explain some things to Gambit about the idea of like something major is about to happen down the road. Now, he also kind of brings up the idea that there have been different moments in time, key moments in time that have truly affected the timeline that our heroes currently live in, like the idea of Jean Grey turning into the Phoenix, or the Mcron Crystal, or the idea of Cyclops, giving up Cable, who then went into the future. And so it's him saying like something big is coming down the road. The idea of Apocalypse is going to bring in some kind of battle against the X-Men. Now, of course, as we all know, the Shattering is just more of a prelude that leads into the next crossover. Now, when it comes to Gambit, when he does get back over to his motel, he does find that Courier has been knocked out. Now, it's the idea that Courier was attacked by Scalp Hunter. Now, when it comes to Gambit, he kind of realized that Scalp Hunter is not really trying to kill off Gambit. That in reality, it's kind of like him wanting to put down Gambit to kind of figure out why in the world Gambit was looking for him. Now, once you do have our boy being able to stop Scalp Hunter, it's now Gambit saying like, dude, listen, the reason why I came to you right now is because I'm looking for Mr. Sinister. But it's also him saying like, listen, I understand that you might have the info that I'm looking for to where to find Mr. Sinister. Now, for Scalp Hunter, he does remind us one thing. As Marauders have been constantly cloned over time in Marvel Comics by Mr. Sinister. And that includes one other person we're going to see here in a moment. But it's Scalp Hunter saying like, dude, we have been cloned so many times that we technically do not remember like where are his actual bases across, the world, or where you could possibly find Mr. Sinister. One person might know. And so this kind of leads into a confusing part of the storyline, and let me explain. You see, when it comes to Sabretooth, around this time in Marvel Comics, he did have adamantium added into his body. Now, it was taken away. I'm not going to tell you by who, because that storyline does take place in Wolverine issue number 145. And I was kind of told, like, hey, don't cover that issue until like later on, like after you do X-Men the Shattering. And so for right now, we're technically not there yet. But it's the idea that when he came to Sabretooth, he had lost the adamantium and really he's on the verge of devastating his life. Like his healing factor is not really being able to heal him up at the moment. And so it's Gambit right now coming to him because he's the one Marauder who might actually know where Mr. Sinister base could be at, and hopefully for Gambit find Mr. Sinister to get information out of him. Now for Sabretooth, it's kind of like, why in the world should I help you? And it's Gambit saying, because I'm going to help you survive. Now, the way Gambit is going to do that is really more the idea of Gambit saying like, hey, listen, I can help you survive by also helping me find Mr. Sinister. Basically saying like, if you help me find Mr. Sinister, he can help me find out what's going on with Charles Xavier, but also find a way to kick your healing factor back in to keep your butt alive. So why not go ahead and take care of me? Now, for Sabretooth, he was staying with this tribe, but I'm not really going to dive too deep into the actual tribe. But either way, you do have Sabretooth agree to help out Gambit and also Courier, because Courier got dragged along by Gambit to hopefully find Mr. Sinister's base. And so this kind of leads into the idea of us seeing Gambit, Sabretooth, and Courier head over to one of the bases that do belong to Mr. Sinister. Now, we're going to kind of stop this part on a cliffhanger, not the actual video, but like this part of the video. Because once you do have our three heroes get inside, they do find a few things. Like, for example, the idea of different testing tubes that do create the different clones of the different members of the Marauders. But they also find three Marauders right now being assigned to get rid of, well, Gambit, Courier, and also Sabretooth. And matter of fact, for Courier, he does get shot in the head, but it's Harpoon, it's Riptide, and also Scalp Hunter, who were assigned by, most likely, Mr. Sinister to bring down Sabretooth, Gambit, and, well, they seem like they took out Courier. But we do get another interlude like we always do in every single issue of this series, and we do pick up with the Fontanelle. Now, when it comes to her, we see her now in the dreams of the Tide Collector. Now, for this character, he does kind of reappear a few times, but really only in stories involving Gambit because his connection to Kendra and also the Thieves Guild and the Assassin Guild as well. But when it comes to Fontanelle, she wants to know what kind of deal was done with Kane and Gambit and also Kendra, but also the idea that for the Tide Collector, he saw Gambit 100 years ago. Now, we kind of got the hint that there's going to be a storyline down the road to explain why in the world that our boy Gambit was in the past 100 years in the past. Now, getting back over to the battle, we do learn that when it comes to Courier, he did survive because, well, Courier has the ability to control every single cell in his body. But when it comes to Gambit, he was able to take down all three members of the Marauders. Now, after doing that, it's now the idea of, Gambit kind of wondering what to do next, because for him and Scalp Hunter, they go way back, right? And so to see the idea of Scalp Hunter being used over and over again by Mr. Sinister just really does bother Gambit a lot. Now, when it comes to Gambit, he wants to find where all the different clone bodies are being kept at and want to destroy the clone bodies to allow Scout Hunter the chance to finally, well, rest. But then you have Gambit be confronted by Mr. Sinister. And so this kind of leads into the ending of the storyline, where it's really more of us now kind of seeing Gambit have a conversation with Mr. Sinister. And so with this conversation is the idea that it's Gambit saying like, hey, look, I need you to help me out here. Like, I need to figure out what's going on with Charles Xavier because the dude does truly believe that there's somebody on the X-Men right now who could possibly be a traitor. And I want to figure out who that traitor could possibly be. But also, like, I want you to help out, Sabretooth. Now, for Mr. Sinister, he does agree. But of course, for Sinister, he got to make a deal, right? He's like, I got an idea because I know what happened to Sabretooth. I can tell which person had drained the adamantium out of his body. So yeah, I can give a little dose of a healing factor, and that should possibly help him recover. And also I had a device that can help you figure out what's going on with your boy Charles. But here's the catch. See, I can do those things for you if you give me Sabretooth. Now, when it comes to Gambit, he already knows that's a bad idea. And so he gives a different idea. Why don't I give you a part of a mutant that has the ability to control every single cell of his body, which means giving a part of Courier over to Mr. Sinister to play with, to kind of learn Courier's genetics. And so for Mr. Sinister, that's the perfect deal. He says yes, just like that. And so you have Gambit cut off a finger of Courier. Now again, for Courier, he has the ability to control every single cell in his body. So he can easily regrow his lost finger. But now for Gambit, he has a device that could possibly help him figure out what's going on with Charles, but also helped out Sabretooth as well. And really, to be honest here, in the opening pages of this storyline for the Shattering, we pick up with Sabretooth. Now, at first, I was kind of confused because we had a huge conversation in our last video when it came to Gambit and the Shattering, because we have figured out that when it came to Sabretooth, he had went through a lot. You see, in the late 1990s, they say, you know what? Wolverine had lost his adamantium. But what if we give Sabretooth some adamantium? Bam, it was kind of different. Now, we didn't see really much of that, but he did have it. But when it came to Gambit, when he found Sabretooth, well, Sabretooth had lost his adamantium. Now, we have not covered that storyline just yet. And the reason why, because I was told to cover Wolverine issue number 145 after we cover X-Men The Shattering, because a lot goes on that one particular issue. But when it came to Sabretooth, he had lost his adamantium. And again, he was with Gambit. And so getting into the opening pages, where we do see Sabretooth right now just being attacked by all these random ninjas, it kind of threw me off a tad bit. But once you do have Sabretooth being able to bring down all these different ninjas, we kind of find out that it's Mystique. So I'm kind of like, cool. I'm not like reading things out of order. We're still good. That's great. But it's her right now trying to use the form of Sabretooth as a way to throw her enemies off. But it's also her kind of wondering, like, who in the world is trying to come after, well, her? But before we're able to properly learn like what's going on when it comes to Mystique and everything, right? We shift over to, well, Kitty Pryde, Rogue, and Nightcrawler. Now again, when it came to the X-Men like disbanding, they all went in different directions. And so for the X-Men book, we're gonna focus on these three characters. Now for the girls, they're having a good old time. They're like, man, this is great, woo. But for Nightcrawler, it's him still kind of worried for Charles Xavier, because for Charles, he didn't really tell the X-Men like, hey, there's somebody on the team who we may not be able to trust. No, he didn't tell anyone that. Again, it was Gambit who was able to kind of figure that out. But for Nightcrawler, it's him kind of wondering like, what's going on with Charles Xavier? So with him kind of not really being in the mood to be out there and having a good old time, he leaves the ladies behind. Now, this right here will lead to Nightcrawler meeting up with a character I am happy to see, and you'll see why. Now we do kind of shift back over to the plot line involving Mystique, but not really with her character, because we do pick up with a few random agents, right? Now these people, they belong to the COPPA, and the COPPA will become very important for this storyline, but we kind of get the idea that it was them who were trying to chase after Mystique. But the question is right now, why in the world are they trying to chase her down for? Then we had to shift over to Rogue, Kitty Pryde. Pride. They're still out there having a good old time and everything. But then a random man comes from behind and grabs the shoulder of Rogue. Now for Rogue, she freaks out. Like she goes full X-Men style here. But she comes to find out that it's Mystique. Now, as we all know, when it comes to Mystique, she is the mother to Nightcrawler, right? But also the stepmother, the adoptive mother to Rogue. And so when it comes to Mystique, she's kind of like, listen, you're the one person I definitely know I can go to when I need some kind of help. And so it's her right now saying like, I need your help. I have a safe house nearby. Can you come with me? Now for Kitty Pryde, she's on guard because for Kitty Pryde and Mystique, they never really did have that interaction where it's kind of like, maybe, just maybe for Mystique, she's kind of in the middle between bad and good. No, for Kitty Pryde, all she knows, Mystique is a villain. And so she's kind of at first on guard, but Rose like, hey, Kitty, let's go with her and allow her the chance to explain things. I want to go ahead and shift back over to Nightcrawler. And the reason why, because for Nightcrawler, he's at a nearby church, right? And while being at that church, he runs into Polaris. Now, again, I want to say by this point, when it came to wrong universe. When it came to the main Marvel universe, I want to say that for X Factor, it was officially canceled by this point. And so it's also the idea of Polaris going to be used as a way to remind us where is Havoc. But before we kind of dive into that right there, we shift over to two classic X-Men villains, Mastermind and Mesmero. Now, here's the thing, because we kind of get the idea that they have their own kind of organization, right? But their organization is kind of going against the Yakuba, but also Mystique as well. Now, again, they do become somewhat important for this storyline, but for right now, we can go ahead and put them currently on the back burner. Now, this is where I kind of had a tad bit to a problem with this storyline. Let me explain. Because for Alan Davis, he's a great writer. Like, we covered a few things on the channel done by Alan Davis, but it's also the idea that kind of felt like he didn't understand the relationship between Rogue and Mystique. And let me explain. Because the last time we saw Rogue and Mystique, and I'm pretty sure the last time we saw them, things did not really end that well between them. And it's always Rogue being on guard when it comes to Mystique. Now, at the same time, she still has somewhat respect for Mystique because that was the lady who kind of took her in and raised her. But again, at the same time, for Rogue, she's always on guard when it comes to, well, again, Mystique. But this time, it's kind of like Mystique being hurt or on the run, and his Rogue being, oh my God, Mom, are you okay? I'm here for you. Less on guard, but being more concerned for Mystique than usual. And so when it comes to Rogue, it's her right now just listening to Mystique's story. Now, when it came to Mystique, use her ability to be this supermodel, better known as Ronnie Blake, right? And so with her being Ronnie Blake, she had the ability to live this very glamorous life. Everyone loved her. Oh my God, she's amazing. But then out of nowhere, she was attacked by the few agents who belong to that organization. Now for Mystique, she has no idea why in the world they were trying to chase her down. But she also kind of realized they must have scanned her like mutant DNA and being able to trace her wherever she goes. And so right now for Rogue, what she wants to do is right now change and begin the process of possibly helping out her mother, figuring out like what in the world is going on here. Now we go ahead and shift back over to Nightcrawler. When it comes to Nightcrawler hanging out with Polaris, we kind of learn here that for Polaris, she feels like someone's following her. Like she's also on the run, but she has no idea who in the world is trying to, follow her. Now, when it comes to Polaris, she does remind us again that by this point in Marvel Comics, Havoc is no longer around. Now, he's not dead, but to the X-Men like Nightcrawler and Polaris, they believe that Havoc is officially dead. But in reality, he's in a different reality right now. And matter of fact, with him being in that different reality, he got his own book, better known as Mutant X. And I'm kind of like wondering if we should go ahead and sit down and cover that storyline when it came to Havoc being in that alternate reality. But for her, she truly does believe like, I know I saw him. It did seem like he died, but a part of me realized or feels like that he's still alive. And so she's right. Like he is alive out there. Now, to close on this chapter, we do shift back over to Rogue. Is Rogue right now investigating the home that belongs to Mystique, or Mystique was Ronnie Blake, that good old supermodel. But while you have Rogue kind of looking around for clues, she's then once again confronted by different agents of the Yakuba, or they could be part of the Yakuba, but right now they're trying to attack Rogue, right? Now, for them, they believe it's another trick because earlier when it came to Mystique, she had pretended to be Sabretooth to throw them off. And so they believe right now it's Mystique pretending to be Rogue to once again throw them off. But in reality, of course, it's not. But you do have the Yakuba kind of run away. And the reason why, because Sunfire appears. But just like those agents, he believes that Rogue is not really Rogue. That right now it's Mystique pretending to be Rogue to throw him off. But either way, he's kind of like, nah, I'm not going to fall for it. And oh yeah, matter of fact, I came here to capture you. And so this kind of leads into the whole idea of us seeing Rogue, fighting against Sunfire, right? Now for Sunfire, it's the idea that he still believes that he's fighting against Mystique. Now, you have Rogue kind of bring us something really important when it comes to the character of Mystique. Like, yes, she does have the ability to take on the form of different people around her, but she does not have the ability to copy that person's powers. And so is Rogue saying like, listen, if I was Mystique, would I be able to do all these different things to you right now, like flying and super strength and stuff like that? And you have Sunfire realize, oh, yeah, you're Rogue. You're not Mystique. Okay, we should probably sit down and have a good old conversation. But before we see that conversation, we then have to dive over to, well, Kitty Pryde. Now, for Kitty Pryde, she is currently watching over Mystique, right? But while doing that, she kind of finds this message left behind by Destiny that tells Kitty Pryde to look into this painting. Now, once Kitty Pryde does that, she finds this diary, this journal. Now, it's the idea that this will lead into Apocalypse the 12, the next crossover that we are going to cover, but also the idea of like other storylines down the road as well. Now, when it comes to Sunfire, it kind of explains that he's currently working for Yapaka as a way to hunt down Mystique. Now, the reason why, because when it came to Mystique, there were these random murders that had happened back in the home country of Sunfire, right? But all the different clues led back into that supermodel that Mystique was pretending to be. And so when it came to Sunfire, he truly did believe that it was Mystique who had killed all those different agents that had worked for Yakuba. One of those agents was a close friend of Sunfire, but you didn't have Rogue realize that Sunfire has been played. And the reason why, because when those murders had happened, Rogue realized Mystique was still pretending to be that supermodel in a different location. She had a whole photo shoot, which also means Mystique is completely innocent, which also means somebody else is trying to set Mystique up. I do want to go ahead and shift over to Polaris. And the reason why, because for Polaris, she does have another reason why to believe in the possibility that Havoc may be alive. And the reason why, because of a character known as the Living Monolith. Now, when it comes to that character right there, he's not really major for the overall X-Men universe, but it's the idea that every energy that Alex Summers is not absorbing, it goes over to him. They have this weird, like, symbiotic thing going on. The thing is that if Alex wasn't around, that means all the energy that he's not absorbing would go over to the Living Monolith. The thing is, they have not seen that character yet, which also means the possibility that Alex is alive. Now, back over Kitty Pryde, is Kitty Pryde looking into the journal that she had found that was left behind by Destiny. Now, remember, guys, when it comes to Destiny, she has the ability to see possible futures. It's not for sure what she sees could possibly happen, but it's also Kitty Pryde realizing that in this one little journal, it basically says Armageddon looms, oh my God, when Xavier is betrayed. The 12 will gather in the darkest hour. Again, the whole idea of the 12. But you did have the story kind of begin to wind down a tad bit here, because when it comes to Rogue and Sunfire, they do find Mastermind and also Mesmero. But here's the problem. Mastermind died a while ago in our coverage over the X-Men. He died by the hands of the legacy virus. So how in the world is he here right now in front of our heroes? Now, for Mastermind and Mesmero, they are able to escape, but at the very last second, leaving our heroes wondering again, how in the world are those two characters right now back in the picture again? But you did have story kind of begin the process of winding down, because once you do have Rogue and Sunfire realize that it's official that Mystique was completely framed, you did have the two characters go their separate ways. But for Sunfire, his main goal right now is to figure out like who did Mastermind and Mesmero work for, while you have Rogue tell Mystique that she is officially clear. But as the story does close, you didn't have Kitty Pryde say, you have to know something. And it's Kitty Pryde but to tell Rogue about what she had found that was left behind by Destiny. And this is when it came to the opening pages of the storyline, I really love the idea of kind of giving us that refresher that is needed when it comes to the character like Marrow. And let me explain. Because for Marrow, when she first appeared in Marvel Comics, she was a child. And the thing was, she was part of the Morlocks. Now, for the Morlocks, they have went through a lot in Marvel Comics up to this point in our coverage over the X-Men. Like, for example, the Mutant Massacre. As we all know, the Marauders went down there and killed off a lot of Morlocks. Now, they were kind of able to bounce back, but then their tunnels were flooded by Mikhail, the brother of Colossus. Now, we were kind of left to believe in the possibility the Morlocks were officially dead. That was not the case. The Morlocks were taken over to a different dimension by Mikhail. Now, for the kids, they grew up fast. And the reason why, because in that dimension, time moved differently. So in that dimension, it could be 1 year there, but in our reality, our dimension, it could be like a day or two or 3, and that would be it. And so when it came to Marrow, she grew up pretty fast in that other dimension that was being controlled by Mikhail. Now, when it came to Mikhail, he had this weird kind of control over them. And what I mean by that statement is the idea that when it came to Mikhail, he had all the Morlocks in some kind of crucible where they were constantly fighting against one another. So they're always trying to prove themselves to their leader and receive things from their leader. But when it came to Marrow, again, she was a child when he went into that dimension. And so she had went through a lot as time moved on. Now, when it came to the second generation of Morlocks who were in that other dimension, they came back over the main Marvel universe, better known as Gene Nation, and they begun the process of trying to attack the humans who they felt like did them wrong. Now, of course, that was an interesting storyline, but you didn't have Callisto say, Marrow, I want you to join the X-Men, to kind of give her the chance of a better life. And so after that, she had officially joined the X-Men. Now, while being with the X-Men, she still kind of went through a lot, and let me explain, because when she first joined the X-Men, her first goal, not really her first goal, but her first problem was her trying to fit in. And the reason why, because she hated the X-Men, because to her, she looks at the X-Men as enemies. Why would you mutants go out of your way to protect humans who will love the idea of seeing you dead? It did not make sense to her at all. And honestly, I agree with her. But when it came to Marrow, though, over time, she began to build relationships with different members of the team. Colossus, Gambit. Now, speaking of Gambit, there was a storyline where the X-Men were lost in space and time, right? But in that storyline, Gambit kind of did hurt Marrow. It was an accident, but she was severely hurt. And so he had to use Shi'ar technology as a way to heal her up. And it kind of changed her form, but also kind of gave her the ability to control the bones in her body a whole lot better than she did in the past. And anyways, when it comes to X-Men The Shattering, while the team did disband, Marrow went with Colossus. And for me personally, it's kind of like, okay, the reason why she did go with Colossus is because of that friendship. But it's also, for me, it seems like Colossus is her big brother. And for Colossus, the dude went through a lot in the 1990s. He lost his parents. He lost his sister. His brother comes back from the dead and then supposedly dies, comes back again, and then disappears. Now, for Colossus, if I remember correctly, he does not remember being told that his brother was technically still alive. So in his mindset, he believes his entire family is gone. But again, it's kind of like Marrow being there as his new little sister in a way. Now we do switch over to Boston. And the reason why, because, well, you have this event but to happen very soon, all these different paintings. And you have security guards right now just watching over all of these different paintings, right? But then one security guard, he examines one painting. That painting is Illyana, the younger sister to Colossus, but Homeboy also sees a ghost there. Now we already know it's not really a ghost, it's Mikhail, but using his powers as a way to appear as a ghost, but not really to bother security guards, but to give him the chance to kind of examine the painting of Illyana, his younger sister. Now let's not forget that this man is responsible for the death of his young sister. He gave her the legacy virus. We covered that in our earlier storyline called New Mutants, Truth or Death. But yes, this man is responsible for the reason why Illyana's dead in Marvel Comics. He gave her the legacy virus. But I want to go ahead and shift over to Marrow. Here's the reason why, because for Marrow, it's her right now kind of wondering if she should use her image inducer to hide her appearance. Because for Colossus and her, they're heading over to that building to examine all those different, paintings, including the one about Illyana as well. But it's the idea that she wants to use her real appearance, but she still has some bones that are sticking out. And so we see her being able to control her powers to hide the bones so that she won't have to go out there in the world as somebody else. She can look like herself finally and see where it takes her. And so we see her and Colossus leave. Now we do shift over to Deathbird, and when it comes to Deathbird, we see her arrive on Earth. And let's not forget that Deathbird left behind Bishop in an earlier storyline, but the idea of her being here now is really more her saying like, hey, listen, I'm here now with all you different people in Egypt who want to see the return of your great pharaoh, your great king. And let me tell you right now, the living monolith will soon be back on Earth once again. And his age of, ruling this world will come very soon. Now, this character is going to be very important when we dive into Apocalypse the 12. But getting back into the plot line involving Colossus and also Marrow, we see the two characters being able to look and observe all the different paintings around them, right? But when it comes to Marrow, we see her having the ability of making a friend, kind of. This random guy known as Zone, but it's also him kind of hitting on her and wanting to be, well, possibly with her. And for Colossus, he's kind of like, listen, let me go ahead and step back and allow her the chance to meet somebody and build a bond with somebody. Except while you do have Colossus and also Marrow kind of just doing their own things, they don't realize they're being watched by somebody. They're being watched by no other than Mikhail, who's right now about to make his move when it comes to Colossus. But while you have Mikhail watching them, for Marrow, things go south very quickly because even though we see her being able to build that bond with that boy, it's the idea that her powers are no longer in her control anymore. So all those different bones, they begin to pop out of her body. And that right there scares everyone in the museum. And matter of fact, for the boy, we kind of find out he hates mutants. And so seeing her being a mutant, he calls her out. She runs away to the bathroom. Now, luckily for her, she does have her image inducer to change her appearance. Now, once she is able to regroup with Colossus, she wants to leave. But they can't leave. And the reason why, because for Mikhail, he opens up a portal and those two fall down to a different location. And we kind of find out that their location they should somewhat know very well. The possibility of maybe, just maybe, they're in the tunnels of the Morlocks. Now for Marrow, she believes that she sees Callisto and she goes chase after her. But for Colossus, he's stopped by his brother. And when it comes to Colossus, he can't believe in the idea of seeing his brother right now standing in front of him. But when it comes to Mikhail, apparently he has this idea of the possibility of bringing back their sister Ileana back to life. Now, as we enter the next chapter, we do learn here that when it came to Mikhail, he took Colossus and Marrow to that other dimension. Now, the other dimension is very important because it was the area where you had, Mikhail take the Morlocks to after he had flooded their tunnels back on Earth. Now, for Mikhail, like we saw in the last chapter, he is saying that he believes he has the ability to bring back their sister. Now, here's the reason why he believes that, because his reality warping abilities, they're beginning to evolve a tad bit more to the point where he's now beginning to believe that he is some kind of god. Now, when it comes to Mikhail, he takes a chair and turns that chair into a creature. Now, when he does that, it's kind of like, okay, so do you have the actual ability to bring someone back to life, though? That's the big question right there. And if you do, will they have their soul? That part right there is really important for this chapter. But now we have to transition over to Marrow. Now, for Marrow, she believes she saw Callisto. Callisto is not there. It's the idea that for Marrow, what she has saw is kind of like this flashback being played in front of her right now when it came to Callisto trying her best to protect Marrow. And the reason why, because if you are a Morlock, a young teenage Morlock, and your powers had not manifested yet, you were kind of well protected. But once your powers did manifested, you had to prove your worth in the Crucible. You were sent out there in the wild to fight against other Morlocks and work your way up to the mountain to hopefully get to the Savior, again being Mikhail, and kind of prove your worth. And so when it came to Marrow, when her powers had manifested, well, when it came to Callisto, she tried to protect Marrow, but unfortunately Marrow was thrown out there and had begun the process of trying to prove her worth, to prove her strength. Now, you do have a storyline go ahead and switch back over to Colossus and Mikhail, and their conversation for me is really important here because it's Colossus saying like, okay, so the reason why you want me around and help you bring back our sister, even though you just said you believe you're some kind of god, because you don't have those memories of her, recent years, because you were gone in that other dimension in a prior mission you were on for our country, Russia. But now you want to use my mind to kind of get a better image of, Ileana when she was a teenager or possibly she was a young girl before she had died. Either way, you want to use what I know about her as a way to bring her back to life. But the question is right now, will she have a soul? That part right there. Will she have a soul? Because yes, you can bring someone back to life. What makes a person is their soul, who they are, what they believe in. Will she be the same kind of person? And so for Colossus, he says no, but that upsets Mikhail even more. Now we get back over to Marrow. This part for me is really important because for Marrow, it's the idea that she realized her life did get somewhat better. But even though she does not want to admit it, her life did get better. The idea of being with the X-Men, that part right there. With her being with the X-Men, she has slowly begun to learn more about her abilities. She was fine with people who did accept her for who she was. And all that information right there is important because it's her kind of right now looking at her past and kind of realize that she has evolved, that she realized that she got what she wanted, but now she's worried about the idea of the possibility of the X-Men officially ending. I kind of want to go ahead and get into the ending of the storyline. The reason why, because, well, let's go ahead and wrap everything up, right? Because there's not really much left. Because once you have Colossus realize what's going on with his brother, he's kind of like, brother, I see your powers had evolved. I see that you are, entering this God state kind of being. But here's your problem, though, brother. Here's your problem. You're not mentally well. You're not mentally stable. But it's also Colossus realizing that when it comes to Mikhail, Mikhail's mind is right now connected to this dimension that's right now being controlled by some kind of creature. And so it's Colossus realizing that that connection has to break. And so you have Mikhail begin to realize that his brother is right, that he has to break that connection to this dimension. And so you have Mikhail being able to break that connection, right? But you have all three characters go back over to Earth. And it does seem like, okay, cool, everything is a-okay, right? No, because with X-Men The Shattering, we're still building up to the next big crossover, Apocalypse the 12. So we do switch over to Deathbird. And we see that for Deathbird, she's trying to make sure she completes her end of some kind of deal, to complete some kind of prophecy. And so we see Deathbird, with some guy, but he takes her out and says who she is, what kind of person she is perfect for me, perfect for us. Take her away. We're going to use her. And this Okay, so it's time for us to go ahead and get back into our coverage over the X-Men. And so with that being said, we're going to pick up with the Astonishing X-Men. Now, here's the thing though, because this is volume 2 for Astonishing X-Men, the second series. The first one was really part of Age of Apocalypse. And I kind of feel like sometimes that particular series does get a tad bit forgotten about, because when you hear the words Astonishing X-Men, it's the one that came out in the mid-2000s that fans really did love a lot. But when it came to volume 2, like volume 1, it was a mini-series that was kind of used for some kind of X-Men event. And volume 2 was used for, well, the Shattering event. Now, guys, when it came to X-Men The Shattering, it's about the idea that for Charles Xavier, he felt like he could no longer trust the X-Men. And the reason why, because he felt like someone on the team is going to betray him. And so what he did was he had disbanded the X-Men team. Now, when it came to like the different members of the X-Men, they weren't told that. Instead, you had Charles tell them like, you guys are no longer able to live up to my standards when it comes to being an X-Men team. And so you had the different members of the X-Men not really liking the idea and kind of saying, you know what, we are out of here. Now, at the very end of the first part of our coverage over X-Men The Shattering, you had Cyclops and Jean Grey come back home to hopefully see what in the world is going on with Charles. But they were not able to get through with Charles. And so when you had Cyclops, Jean Grey, and Wolverine about to leave a school for what seems like for good, they were then confronted by Nina. Now, we had talked very briefly about Nina because when she first appeared in Marvel Comics, it was the very end of X-Men Onslaught, but leading into X-Men Operation Zero Tolerance. And it was the idea that Bastion had created her, a Man Knight. We also learned that for Bastion, he had created other Man Knights as well. And so when it came to Bastion, we were kind of left to wonder, what are these Man Knights all about? And that kind of leads into today's storyline, Astonishing X-Men, because for X-Men The Shattering, you have basically all the different X books be used to kind of tell different stories of the different members of the X-Men after you had Charles disband the X-Men, Uncanny X-Men, X-Men, Gambit, and you also had the Astonishing X-Men book as well. Now, this book right here does focus more on Cyclops, Jean Grey, and Wolverine, but also putting together a new team with those three characters, but also three other characters as well. But the storyline is also kind of giving us a little better insight on the idea of the Man Knights. But as we get into the opening pages for the first chapter, we do pick up with, well, Bastion. Now, for Bastion, I want to say after the Cable Machine Man or Bastion Machine Man annual, he was officially captured once again. And so currently right now, he's a prisoner, and you have different scientists, government scientists right now running tests on him. Now for Bastion, he realized what's coming for him. And it's Bastion right now being completely scared about the idea of who is coming for him. And so we see the whole entire facility get wrecked. And we get our first look at our mysterious bad guy, and apparently he is called Death. But you then had the story go ahead and switch over to Jean Grey. Now, when it comes to Jean Grey, it's really more her contacting the 3 members of the X-Men that she wants to help join her team that her and Cyclops and Wolverine has put together. And that would be Archangel, Cable, and also Nate Grey. Now, for Nate Grey, this is a big moment. And the reason why, because for Nate Grey, he was always kind of like part of the X family, but also kind of like an outcast. And the reason why, because for Nate Grey, he comes from the age of apocalypse reality, but also he is Cable without the idea of the techno-organic virus holding him back. And so for Nate Grey, with him kind of being this outcast and not really able to build bonds with the different members of the X-Men except for like Jean Grey, it's kind of cool to see him being like, you know what, it's time for me to go ahead and begin the process of helping out the X-Men. And so we do see all 3 characters arrive once you have Jean Grey explain things to them. Now, their main goal is to find Nina. Now, when it comes to Nina, she met Charles Xavier at the end of X-Men Onslaught because she was in a prison with Charles thanks to Bastion holding on to both of them. And so the idea of Nina being there and contacting Jean Grey and saying like, hey, I need your help, but also the rest of the Man Knight need your help as well. Please come find us. It kind of showed Jean Grey being very concerned because she knows how powerful Nina truly is. Now, once you do have the team arrive at that location, you have Cyclops beginning to kind of freak out. And the reason why, because for Cyclops, he remembers this place very well. And the reason why, because this place was the place where you had Bastion held the X-Men as prisoners back in Operation Zero Tolerance. But also, it was the place where you had Bastion place a bomb inside of Cyclops. Like, it was pretty wild. And it kind of begun the process of removing Cyclops from the X-Men. But either way, you have the X-Men realize they don't have a choice here. They have to go ahead and get inside there to hopefully find Nina and the rest of the Man Knights. And so we do kind of see the team working together pretty well, but also at the same time for Nate Grey, he's kind of wondering how he'll be able to fit in with this team because he's not really used to the idea of being part of a team. It's all new to him. But either way, you do have the team work together as they work their way through the whole entire facility and then kind of realize the walls and also the floors are beginning to move like somebody's able to control all of that. And that would be Headcase. Now, once you do have the X-Men find Headcase, which is one of the Man Knights, you have Nina being able to introduce both parties. Now, what she wants to do is take the X-Men over to the rest of the Man Knights. But for Jean Grey, she does realize there's somebody else in the building, but in a different direction that Nina is not trying to go down to. And so it's kind of like, Nina, who's down there? Who in the world are you trying to keep us away from? And we kind of find out it's Bastion. Now, when it comes to Bastion, most of his body right now at this moment is mostly destroyed. And so it's kind of like, okay, he's just ahead. But this comes out of the idea of what happened over in his annual that he has shared with, I want to say Machine Man. But for Cyclops, he's very surprised to see that Bastion's here right now. Now, when it comes to the X-Men, what they want to do is go ahead, leave him there for the time being, but also find the rest of the Man Knights, which they were able to do. And so you have Nina kind of being used to introduce both of the parties once again. But here we go. Things right now are about to pop off very quickly. Because that is the moment where we do see somebody trying to break into the area where our heroes are all at the moment. Now, you have Nate Grey trying to hold the door shut. Whoever this person is, Death, is just being able to beat down on the door where Nate Grey is about to lose that battle with him trying to hold the door up. And so you have Jean Grey realize they gotta go. And so you have Cyclops and Cable leave to go get Bastion while you have Wolverine, Archangel, and Jean Grey try their best to get the Man Knights out of there. But here comes the next big problem though. You see, when it comes to our heroes, one of the Man Knights set off the failsafe for this facility. The whole entire place is going to blow up. And so you have Nina being able to teleport her, Jean Grey, Archangel, Nate Grey, and the rest of the Man Knights outside the base, while you have Cyclops and Cable continue on to hopefully find Bastion. Now, they don't find Bastion. He's completely missing. But you do have the two guys go ahead and get the heck out of the facility before it got, well, blown up. Now, when it comes to Jean Grey, she realized after Nina was able to teleport everyone out of there, the rest of the Man Knights ran off because they're scared of the idea of death. And then the whole entire facility blows up. Now, we're kind of led to believe at first that maybe, just maybe, Death is dead, right? Nope, he's alive, but he's also holding on to the head of Bastion as well. But as we get into the next chapter, we're now kind of getting into the idea of seeing the X-Men just trying their best to survive. Here's the reason why. Because right now, the Blackbird is about to crash. Because when that facility got blown up, it was a nuclear explosion done underground, but still being able to affect the Blackbird. And so right now for Wolverine, he's trying his best to land the Blackbird. But on top of that, you also have Death there as well. He also shoots a blast out to kind of force the Blackbird to land. Now, when it comes to Jean Grey, she kind of realized what's next for the X-Men. Because you have Jean Grey go into what is the mind of Nina. Now, once you have Jean Grey go into the mind of Nina, she realized that this is not a normal person mind. It is completely different. There's wires everywhere. And so for Jean Grey, it's her right now trying to understand Nina. And so Jean Grey wants to go deeper into the mind of Nina. Except Nina is then contacted by the rest of the Man Knights who ran away earlier. And they're right now telling her, like, you need to leave Jean Grey alone. Leave them alone. But you didn't have Nina realize that one of the Man Knights, Darko, is going through something called the Changing. And then Jean Grey now realize they have to find the Man Knights. And so that kind of leads into the X-Men breaking up into two different teams. The first team will be Nate Grey, Wolverine, and Jean Grey going with Nina to find the rest of the Man Knights, while you have Cable, Archangel, and Cyclops stay behind to hopefully defeat Death. Now, when it comes to Cable, it's him kind of freaking out because Death reminds him of something, the dark future where he comes from. And so it's Cable saying, like, we have to find him. And when we do, we gotta stop him no matter what. And so this kind of leads us back over to the other team, Jean Grey, Nate Grey, and Wolverine. Now, when they do arrive at the location of where the Man Knights could possibly be at, you have them realize that organic and non-organic materials are kind of being moved all around. Humans in this area are now completely stuck in some kind of materials. And so you have Wolverine going out his way to free those humans. Now, it's Wolverine also realizing that the metal, the plastics, it's all being absorbed right now by something. And now it'll be Darko, one of the Man Knights. And we learn here that for Darko and the Man Knights, every once in a while, they go through something called the changing. Their body is evolving. Their powers are evolving. But the problem is that they're no longer really able to control their bodies while they're going through the changing. And so what we're seeing right now is Darko going through a changing. But now we pick up with Cable and also Cyclops. Now, it's also Cyclops who has been trying his best to bond with Cable. Because again, Cable is a son of Cyclops that came from the future. Because for Cyclops, he had no choice to give Cable up over to the Astonishing clan to save Cable's life when he was infected by the techno-organic virus. And so for Cable, it's him kind of like, Dad, not right now. Our main focus should be finding Death and hoping to stop him. Now, you do have our two heroes find Bastion, and it's him saying, like, y'all been set up. Like, Death wanted you guys to find him. And then out of nowhere, Archangel just crashes right in front of them because Death just took him out and now trying to attack Cable and Cyclops. So now we're kind of seeing both teams struggling here because when we do switch back over to the other team, it's the idea of Darko tentacles just going all over the place, grabbing people and other things around him and trying to absorb them, like Jean Grey. She's also now being absorbed. Now, she was saved at the very last second by Nate Grey, but for Jean Grey, she kind of realized what she has to do now to hopefully help out Darko in this kind of situation. You see, for Jean Grey, what she does is calm him down. And so once she's able to calm him down, you then have Darko enter this crystal cocoon. Now, once he does enter a crystal cocoon, it's kind of like part of their changing. It's the idea, once again, his body is evolving, his body is changing, but now his powers are back under control again. So everything should be a-okay for the time being. But once you have Jean Grey contact Cyclops for death, that's what he wanted, because now with the idea of Jean Grey contacting Cyclops, he now should be able to locate Jean Grey and the rest of the Man Knights. And so you have Cable, Archangel, and Cyclops get into the Blackbird and try their best to head over to where Jean Grey and the others are at. But for Cyclops, Cable, and Archangel, they don't realize that Death is right now riding on top of the Blackbird. And so technically, they're giving him a free ride over to his targets, which again are the Man Knights. And so as we're getting into the final chapter of the storyline, we're really picking up with Jean Grey and her team just waiting for Cyclops' team to reunite with them. Now, when Wolverine looks up, he sees Cyclops and his team right now on the Blackbird, but he realizes the Blackbird is being attacked by Death. Like Homeboy is right now trying to wreck the entire Blackbird and make sure it crashed hard into the ground. And so you have Jean Grey and the others kind of use their powers to save Cable and also Cyclops and Archangel to get away from the Blackbird before it does crash into the ground pretty hard. Now, I want to go ahead and focus on Jean Grey here. And the reason why, because the rest of this chapter is going to be Jean Grey kind of realizing something about Death. Like it's her saying like, your mind seems familiar. Like, I know your mind very well, but unfortunately I have no idea who you truly are. And that right there becomes very important outside X-Men the Shattering, really. But anyways, for Jean Grey, she is able to grab her husband. But you didn't have the X-Men kind of wonder like, okay, cool, is he officially gone now? Like, let's go ahead and look for different clues so we find a dead body that belongs to Death. And so when it comes to Wolverine, he finds a sword that belongs to Death. Now, when Wolverine does pick up the sword, we see the sword go ahead and release some kind of psionic energy to take out Cable, Jean Grey, and Nate Grey. Take out the big hitters on the team. That leaves behind Wolverine, Cyclops, and also Archangel. And that's really it. Now, technically, you do have the other three characters being able to jump back into the battle. But as the battle goes on, once again, you have Jean Grey realize something. She looks at the guy kind of like, you seem familiar. Where do I know you from? Like, who are you? Like, what in the world is going on here? And so when it comes to Jean Grey, she also kind of recognize the eyes of Death. Now, this leads into a big moment when it comes to X-Men comics, the possibility of the death of Wolverine. Because you have Wolverine jump in as a way to protect Jean Grey from death, right? And so you're kind of like, cool, is Wolverine still kind of showing that he's madly in love with Death? Now, you have Death cut Wolverine. Now, usually when it comes to Wolverine, as we all know, like we all X-Men fans here, Wolverine has a healing factor. And so for Wolverine, he should be able to just bounce right back. But that's the problem right there. Wolverine is not really able to bounce back right now. It seems like he's dying. Matter of fact, you have Jean Grey make sure that Wolverine is not dying, but Wolverine is dead, y'all. He dies right there, right in front of our heroes. Now, when it comes to Death, he disappears because in his mindset, the Man Knights are now strong. They kind of proved themselves, even though technically they didn't do anything here, but he believes they're strong now, so he leaves them alone. But he says, this is only the beginning. So kind of hinting at the idea that yes, Death does work for Apocalypse. And yes, this leads into the next crossover. But now the problem is Wolverine officially dead? Okay, so getting back into our coverage over X-Men, The Shattering, we do pick up the last two chapters of this crossover. Now, hear me out, because X-Men, The Shattering is a great crossover that leads into another event better known as X-Men Apocalypse the 12. And honestly, I cannot wait to jump into that crossover next. But when it comes to X-Men, The Shattering, it all began with Charles Xavier. You see, in the late 1990s, for Marvel comics, really more X-Men comics, for Charles Xavier, he kind of went through a lot. Now, we could say the whole entire 90 period where it was just Charles and the X-Men going through the ringer. But the late 1990s are really more important here, and let me explain, because we had the event of Onslaught. That was pretty major. The idea of Charles turning into Onslaught and just going on a rampage. You then had Operation Zero Tolerance, where you had Bastion have Charles Xavier locked away for many, many months. And really, even after that event, he was still locked away until you had the X-Men being able to locate Charles and reunite with him and everything. But again, for Charles, he kind of went through a lot in the 1990s. But when it came to X-Men The Shattering, it was Charles kind of realizing that somebody on the team is going to betray him. And the question was like, who? And so instead of telling the X-Men the honest truth, what he did was he told the X-Men, you guys are no longer living up to my standards at all. And so he technically disbanded the X-Men. Now, when it came to the whole entire crossover, with the idea of the team being disbanded, you then have different storylines taking place in the different X-Men books. So Uncanny X-Men, X-Men, Gambit, and also Astonishing X-Men, which was a miniseries used kind of show a different team of the X-Men with Jean Grey, Cyclops, Wolverine, Archangel, Cable, and also Nate Gray, better known as X-Men. Now, all those storylines being done, it's all coming back together for the end result of the actual event. The idea that Wolverine is officially dead. He died at the very end of Astonishing X-Men, the miniseries. And so that is why, like, I kind of like the opening pages of the storyline, because it's really more of us getting that recap in different ways. Because again, when it came to the Charles Xavier disbanding the X-Men part of the storyline, you had the different characters go their separate ways. Like, for example, Rogue, Nightcrawler, and also Kitty Pryde. They have been hanging out with one another. And of course, they had a run-in with Mystique. And for Nightcrawler, he ran into Polaris post Alex Summers' death. Even though technically Havoc is not dead, he's just right now in a different reality. But it's them right now just hanging out. And then Kitty Pryde, she gets the phone call and she can't believe what she just heard. And that trend kind of continues on in the first few pages, because we did switch over to Charles Xavier and Storm. Now, Storm was the only person that Charles had supposedly trusted, so she stayed by his side. But we see Charles is now going over to the different X teams that still were around at this time for Marvel Comics. So like Generation X, X-Force, not X-Factor, and also not Excalibur either. But just like Charles Xavier did not trust the X-Men, it's him kind of saying like, I don't trust these guys either. And so he's kind of going in their minds to make sure that X-Force is X-Force, and the same goes for the rest of the team as well. But is Storm also getting that call? And so you have Charles and Storm head back over to the mansion. When it comes to Colossus and also for Marrow, they get that call as well. Now for Marrow and Colossus, they ran into Mikhail, the brother to Colossus, but also kind of like this savior, this special person in a way for Marrow as well when it comes to Mikhail. But for Colossus, he gets that call like, hey, what? Who died? Okay, cool. I'm on my way. So you now have everyone being able to come back together to realize Wolverine is dead. Like, he's laying right there in front of them. But it's hard for them to believe in the idea that Wolverine is dead because it's Wolverine. The dude had a healing factor. So to see the idea of Wolverine just laying there and possibly dead, it really does a number to all the different members of the X-Men. Now, this is Cyclops kind of giving us a rundown, like, what exactly happened to Wolverine? How was he officially killed off? And of course, it's the whole idea of Astonishing X-Men miniseries, where you have Cyclops' team help out Nina and the rest of the Man Knights who were being chased down by a new character called Death, who was able to kill Wolverine off just like that. And so when it comes to the X-Men, they're kind of wondering, like, how was Death able to kill off Wolverine? Because Wolverine has a healing factor. And so for Charles Xavier, he called Beast and also Moram and Tagger to do an autopsy on the body of Wolverine to figure out what exactly happened to him. Now for Charles, he wants to figure out who in the world is targeting mutants now? Now for Archangel, he dips out. And the reason why, because he wants to find his girlfriend Psylocke. Now we also get a call back here because for Psylocke, in an earlier storyline called Psy-War, almost said Shadow War, for Psylocke, she had lost her abilities fighting against Shadow King. But either way, she's still a mutant that could be targeted. And so for Archangel, he wants to make sure that his girlfriend is okay, so he leaves. And so when it comes to Cyclops and Charles Xavier, they begin to argue. Here's the reason why, because it's Charles right now continuing to question Cyclops over and over again. And the rest of the X-Men, they're there as well, and they're watching this go off because it's Cyclops saying like, dude, you keep questioning me over and over again, trying to see if I'm hiding anything from you. But in reality, I'm not. I'm telling you every single thing, step by step, about what exactly happened to Wolverine on our last mission. But it's also now Charles questioning Cyclops' leadership skills, saying like, can you really be a great leader? Like, look at you right now. You are now responsible for the death of one of my X-Men. Wolverine is now officially dead. And so it's son and father right now just going complete crazy towards one another because it's Cyclops now wanting to like get in Charles' face. Now, this gets even worse. And the reason why, because again, Charles did not tell none of the X-Men about the possibility that somebody on the team could be a traitor. Instead, he said, you guys are no longer living up to my standards, and then disbanded the X-Men team. But the reason why I'm saying that right now, because for Charles, he says, I know what's happening now. It's Jean Grey. She is now the Phoenix again, and she's now controlling the mind of Cyclops. Now, of course, for Cyclops, he wants to protect his wife, but this leads into a whole battle between all the different members of the X-Men. And the reason why, because every single person has a reason to not trust another member on the team. For example, the idea of Jean Grey possibly being the Phoenix again. Let's not forget, in the early 1990s, when it came to Colossus, he left the X-Men and joined Magneto's side. For Gambit, we had learned the dude had a hand in the mutant massacre, and the list goes on and on. And so you now have the X-Men battling against one another. But now we have to switch back over to Archangel. Here's the reason why, because for Archangel, again, he's heading back home to make sure that his girlfriend is okay. But then he realized that something is following him. Now, he is able to kind of like fly away and lose them, but then he realized this flying saucer or flying spacecraft is still heading over to where his home is at, which also means they're still going after Psylocke. And so for Archangel, he wants to make sure that his girlfriend is a-okay. Now, getting back over to the rest of the X-Men right now, really does show like how shattered it is right now, how fractured the team truly is, because you have the X-Men kind of choosing sides, but also themselves as well. Because again, you still have some folks on there who still believe like, yeah, you know what? We are still on Charles' side no matter what. But you have the ones who kind of decided like, no, Charles had officially lost his mind. He is somebody we can no longer follow. But then on top of that, like I said earlier, you still have people who have different reasons to not trust someone else on the team. And so we're seeing the battle continue on. Cable fighting against Jean Grey, or Marrow fighting against Cable, Colossus fighting against Nate Grey. Like, you have all these different things happening left and right. But the problem is right now, we're getting to that point where it's the X-Men beginning to kill each other. Like, literally killing each other. Nightcrawler, gone. And then you have Colossus, who's also slowly dying, grab Nate Gray and plunge this sharp object through his body. Just like that, Nate Gray is dead. Colossus is dead. It's kind of like, oh my God, even Rogue is now possibly dead as well. But when we do get back over to Archangel, you have Archangel realize that there are different people right now trying to break into his estate. The problem is that he's also attacked from behind, but he's attacked by someone else. Well, technically himself is another Archangel. So we're kind of left to wonder how in the world right now are there two different Archangels? But now we're kind of getting into like the ending for this first chapter, Uncanny X-Men issue number 375, because you do have, Kitty Pryde holding on to the man she loves so much. And the same thing goes for Gambit as well, as he also holds on to Rogue, the person he loves so much as well, as both of these characters dies in their arms. And so it does seem like it's just Gambit and also Kitty Pryde who are still alive. But then out of nowhere, you have both Kitty Pryde and Gambit look back and see Charles Xavier turn to Onslaught. You see Jean Grey turning into the Dark Phoenix, leaving us wondering what exactly is going on here. But you have Onslaught and Dark Phoenix grab Kitty Pryde, grab Gambit, and it does seem like both of these characters are now going to officially die. But then we kind of find out it was all fake. And the reason why, because for Charles, what he did here was really more of him trying to figure out who could he trust? And so he had no choice kind of play out a scenario in the minds of the different members of the X-Men to figure out like, who could no longer be trusted? Who is that person who could possibly betray the team? And so that is why he had a whole scenario play in their minds. Now, it's also him kind of breaking down the different reasons why he believes each person on the team can now be officially trusted. And it all began with Storm. That is why Storm stayed behind, because she's the one person that Charles can read so clearly. But other people like Nate Gray or Cable or Gambit, people who are usually outcasts, they're hard to read. And the reason why, because they made sure their minds are well protected. But again, he had no choice to play those mind games, to give him the chance to look into the minds of every single person who's on the X-Men team right now. Now, the problem is, like, you have the team very upset about the idea of him doing that. Kind of like, dude, what is wrong with you? Why in the world would you do that for? And you then have Charles say, let me show you. And I'm pretty sure Beast and Moira are now officially done looking over the dead body of Wolverine. But this leads us back over to Archangel fighting against Archangel. Now, this battle is very short-lived. And the reason why, because you have Psylocke being able to, well, protect Archangel. And so with her doing that, they now have the chance to escape. Now, just like that, we then switch back over to the X-Men, because we kind of find out that Wolverine is not Wolverine. That Wolverine is a Skrull, which also means Wolverine's not dead. But now the question is, where in the world is Wolverine? Now, this part right here is really important because it's a callback to an earlier storyline where you had the X-Men lost in space and time. Let me explain. Because you had the X-Men travel back in time by force, and they had landed in the home world of the Skrulls in the past, prior to Galactus consuming their home world, right? Now, for the X-Men, they were able to steal a spacecraft to get back to their Earth. The problem was that when they had arrived to their Earth, they were still in the past. Now, the spacecraft did have this hibernation chamber where our heroes were technically frozen in time, up to the point where they can come back out at their point in time where they had officially left it, when they had traveled back in time. The problem was that when they had woke up, they woke up prior to Magneto War, right where you had Magneto release that EMP. And they thought at first that EMP that hit them was the reason why they were knocked out, but their spacecraft was also depowered as well. That was not the case. We get the idea the Skrulls had found their spacecraft, got onto the X-Men spacecraft, kidnap Wolverine and replace him. And the question is now, where is Wolverine? But also, this leads into X-Men. Well, yeah, it does. It leads into Apocalypse the 12. But we still have one more chapter to cover. But this kind of leads into X-Men issue number 95. Now, with this issue, you are now talking about the idea of the X-Men trying to figure out where Wolverine could be yet. Here's the problem, because for the X-Men, they do know that Wolverine is with the Skrulls, but the Skrulls are a huge alien race with an empire. Like, they could be almost anywhere across the universe. And so the problem is now, how in the world are they going to be able to locate Wolverine? But now we had to switch over to the Skrulls, right? Now, for the Skrulls, they're trying to make another Wolverine, but this time it has to be completely perfect. The last one almost was, but again, the problem is that it did not have Wolverine's healing factor. And so this next one must have Wolverine's healing factor. One more time. Wolverine's healing factor. You just can't have a regular healing factor. And the reason why, because if you're an X-Men and you know Wolverine very well, and you see Wolverine get blasted in the back, but does not get right back up, you're kind of wondering like, hey, what's going on with Wolverine? Why is he not getting right back up again to help us out? Because that person may not have Wolverine's healing factor. And that's the problem right there. Now, while you do have the scientist continue on with his next work making a new Wolverine, we kind of focus more on these different Skrulls who are not technically prisoners, but they have been chosen to be used for different kinds of experiments. But these Skrulls begin to talk to one another about what happened in that previous story arc when the X-Men were lost in time and space. They heard the rumors of how the X-Men were trying their best to save the home world of the Skrulls from Galactus, but they had failed. And so with these Skrulls, they're kind of wondering, why in the world are they now trying to attack the X-Men for? Like, shouldn't the X-Men right now be praised for what they had done in the past? But getting back over to the X-Men, you have the X-Men right now, really more Charles Xavier, really wanting to kind of push himself in the X-Men even more to hopefully locate Wolverine, to hopefully bring Wolverine back home, right? Now, when it comes to Storm, she says, hey, let's not do that. But for the X-Men, they're currently in the danger room. Now, while they're going through their danger room session, that kind of leads into the idea of the X-Men right now kind of having this conversation, because you have Nightcrawler go over to Cyclops and he said, hey, Scott, I ran into Polaris and she was really paranoid. She always kind of felt like somebody or something was following her. And honestly, when I was around her, I didn't sense or see anything, but she kind of felt like something or someone was following her. Now, again, it's her being paranoid, but it came after Havoc had died, your brother, her boyfriend. And so it's Cyclops saying, you're right. Now, for the X-Men, they have no idea that Havoc is actually alive, that currently right now, he is just in another reality. But for Cyclops, kind of like, what if there is some kind of connection between Polaris and also Wolverine? And the thing is, for the X-Men, they are right, because for the Skrulls, they are always watching different people who were or still are part of the X-Men, like Polaris. It's the idea they know everything about the X-Men, Cyclops, Jean Grey, Nightcrawler, and all their background when they go to pay Polaris a visit. And they realize they need somebody they could use to possibly get close to Polaris. And that'd be only one person. That would be Havoc. But again, Havoc is dead. But for Polaris, if she does see Havoc, she'll let her guard down just like that. And so for the Skrulls, their next mission now is to go after Polaris. And honestly, they don't wait that long because they do go over to Polaris' apartment, but they tend to be Havoc. And so of course, you have Polaris let her guard down. And so once she does that, you then have this Skrull Havoc being able to capture Polaris and begin the process of bringing her back over to their spacecraft. Now, the X-Men were able to follow the Skrulls over to the spacecraft, right? We also kind of find out here that for Polaris, it's not Polaris. It was Cyclops pretending to be Polaris, because for the Skrulls, they use a device to shut down her powers, not his powers. And so once you do have the X-Men and Cyclops begin to work together, their main goal is to now locate, Wolverine. They believe somewhere in this base. Here's the thing, Wolverine is in this base, but not in the way that you were probably expecting, because you didn't have Death appear. Now, when Death does appear, he begins the process of also killing off Skrulls, but also placing bombs around the entire base that belongs to the Skrulls. Now, the X-Men, they were able to see him, and after a nice small battle between him and the X-Men, we kind of find out who Death truly is. That Death is right now Wolverine. That somehow, in some way, Wolverine is now a horseman of apocalypse. And so you didn't have, Wolverine teleport away. Now, once that happens, it's the X-Men realizing that their worst enemy is now back in the picture again. Here comes Apocalypse, but also, again, Wolverine is now a horseman.